All right. This week we're talking about chapter 31. 31 is really into the 60s, and so we get a lot of different concepts and themes that you're probably familiar with. And so I don't necessarily want to go over the entire chapter, but just a few things that I think are important for you to understand. One is this idea of Kennedy's new frontier. President Kennedy is newly elected. He is this rising star. Everybody loves him because he's young. This idea of Camelot with him and Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy, they present this ideal that the American public is looking for. His idea, though, and we've kind of read a little bit about Kennedy and what he's been doing, and so I don't really mean to go into a lot of what about him, although I do love the Kennedys. Really, what I'm looking for is the new frontier, what he's looking at funding. Like all presidents, he comes in with this idea or these ideas that he wants to institute. One of those is federal aid to education. He thinks that the government should be funding education with more money. He continues to push for higher education, for better schools, and trying to get that done. He's also trying to find a way to fund healthcare for an aging population, which he tries to do in various ways that you'll read this week. But hopefully you're able to see what it is that he's trying to do with that. He tries to expand civil rights. He tries to create a Department of Urban Affairs on a federal level. And then he tries to expand the space program. These are all things that he's trying to get done by passing legislation, but he can't get it. He can't do that due to not having a majority in Congress. And so because of that, he's not able to get a lot of the things done that he wants to. However, he's been campaigning to the poor, and so all of these things are going to benefit them. And so the idea is that if he can get through and get some of these things passed, he will be able to help the base that elected him. Even though, I mean, he was although he was elected president by the majority. So we do get Kennedy's assassination, which then gives Lyndon B. Johnson the presidency, and he's sworn in after or just before on the plane leaving Dallas, Texas. LBJ, his idea is the Great Society, similar to the New Frontier that Kennedy was after. It declares a war on poverty. It expands the welfare system so that we can really help those people who are in poverty. It creates Medicare and Medicaid. A lot of times, especially here recently, I've heard a lot of people talk about how Medicaid and Medicare were things that came out of the New Deal. That is actually incorrect. And I want to make sure that as you read this week that you see that Medicare and Medicaid come out of LBJ's Great Society. LBJ gives more grants to college students as he's moving forward. He wants to get racial quotas for immigrants abolished. Okay, rather than having certain quotas, we're going to let people in different ways, visas, things like that. Okay. The problem with the Great Society is that it increases taxes, which, as you know, most people don't like, and so it's difficult for him to do this. But he does find ways to start this war on poverty. But I think that after being reelected after the assassination is his demise, is really the Great Society. A lot of conservatives don't like this idea, and so he loses that next election, which we'll see later. Lastly, the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement really has started, and we've been looking at it throughout the last several chapters. But what we get in 61 are the Freedom Riders, who are attempting to integrate buses and trains and those stations. In 63, you get the March on Washington, which MLK speaks at. That's where he gives his "I Have a Dream" speech. In 64, you have the Civil Rights Act that Lyndon Johnson passes into legislation. Okay, signs into legislation. And then in 65, you have the Voting Rights Act. And in 68, we see the Black Power movement. Now, something that I want you to see as you move forward is really the idea of the two. You have this nonviolence that's been taking place with Martin Luther King. But then you have Malcolm X that we're going to read about in this chapter, who is really finding that it's by any means necessary. That in order to get civil rights passed, we need to be in your face. The protests aren't working, and so you get the Black Panther movement that comes out of this. Black Panthers is definitely something that I would read this week. I'd take some time. A lot of people believe that they were a militant group, which in some respects that they were. However, in most areas around the country, they were doing a lot more to help the poor and the African American neighborhoods. They had lunch programs. They had breakfast programs for children. They carried groceries. They did a lot more than just stand on corners with guns. Okay, and it's more complex than what a lot of America likes to give it credit for. With that, you have the rise of Stokely Carmichael before the Black Panther movement. He kind of breaks off from Martin Luther King Jr. And really is pushing for civil rights in saying that, look, we need to have younger people getting out and helping this movement, and really pushing for a lot more legislation, a quicker. This is the best way I could put it. He's looking for quicker action rather than this. Let's sit back and see. Now, MLK did the exact same thing. In the end, he wanted to know why we had to wait, why it was that we couldn't get things passed. He talked to Kennedy, he talked to LBJ, trying to get some of these things passed, and just asked how long we had to wait. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that Martin Luther King was like, well, I'll sit back and I won't, we'll take our time. It's non-violent protest, things like that. But it was still protest, and he still went to jail. And so we need to see all of these groups or these individuals as they are, as complex people who got frustrated, who maybe didn't think that nonviolence was the way, or maybe thought nonviolence was the way. So as you read this week, look at the many different struggles that African Americans are going through during the civil rights movement. That should give you themes and concepts for chapter 31. If you have any questions, please email me or give me a call or stop by my office. We'll talk to you later.